unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty. Today, we're going to be talking about the housing woes, with all the other news going on, deportations, immigration, the building the wall, the economy here, this, that, the other, everything going on. Some of the minutia of stuff that really impacts everybody's day-to-day life, many millions, tens of millions of people, sometimes gets overlooked for those big, glaring, sexy headlines. Here today to talk with us about housing woes and housing trends in the market is Real Estate for Life President Dave Theisen. Davey, how you doing, man? Good to have you.
Gary, a pleasure to be here.
Just for full disclosure here, Dave and I have known each other for, 15 years, maybe. Is that probably close? So that's a good it's a good barometer. So Dave, I can tell you personally for the audience, Dave, my mom used to have an expression: "What that man doesn't know isn't worth knowing." And certainly when it comes to real estate and the pro-life movement and marrying them together and developing this whole thing that he has, Real Estate for Life, which we're going to get into later in the show. Dave's your guy. Absolutely. So hats off and thanks for coming on again, Dave. Appreciate it.
It was a Holy Spirit inspired idea that was given to us as a gift. So we're happy to run it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's great. And again, for the audience, we'll get into what all of that is later. Dave, first I talked about, there's an article appeared in a liberal publication. I don't want to say its name, so I don't want to give it any creds, but, it was truthful, and it was talking about the problems for young buyers, especially young families, when it comes to being first-time buyers of homes, how challenging all of this is. And they're very, what do we do? And then the article pointed out that, the average age now of a home first-time buyer is 38, young family, 38 years old, and they're having to struggle to actually get a home, because the interest rates are so high, the demand is is high, the supply is somewhat limited. All of this, of course, it has knock-on effects on a culture. If you can't, if people are dissuaded from starting families and all that because they don't have a place to have a family, all of that becomes problematic. But let's start first of all with what do you see in the question of what are the major causes of this, and then we can get into what the effects of it are.
Certainly. Well, there's a number of them, and they generally revolve around government policy. Yeah. One of the things that doesn't get mentioned is the M2 money supply, which is basically the amount of cash that is really available in the U.S. economy for consumers, should be around $15 trillion. After the COVID, we're running at $21 trillion. So we pumped $6 trillion of printed money into the system, and that gave us 30 to 40% inflation.
Hold up there for 1 second. I want to make sure people understand the point of that. When the government releases these numbers that inflation, particularly under Biden, is like 6%, 8%, 9%. That's not really the real number, is it?
No, they have what they call their basket of goods,
right?
And they play with the basket.
Yeah.
So Larry Summers, who is a liberal economist, said that he thinks the inflation rate is 30 to 40% higher than reported.
Right.
So, and at the end of the day, no matter what the numbers reported are, everything costs 30 to 40% more, whether it's housing, food, insurance, clothes, furniture, you name it.
Right.
So, and that level is we're not going back. That is the new level.
Mm-hmm.
So today we have a situation where the average home is $400,000. The interest rate is just about 6.8% on a 30-year fix.
Yeah, and that just ticked up earlier this week. I mean, that just went up even more.
Yeah, nominally, but 6.7 to 6.8, we've been hovering in there. So we're a little on the high end of that range right now. But,
right.
So those are some big barriers to getting into a home.
Right.
And the supply side, there really has been under construction of homes in affordable ranges for quite a few years. And also, you have a number of people that are living in homes with interest rates that are 2, 3, 4%.
Sure.
They might be an older couple in a two-story, but they don't want to move out of that house and then buy something else at 7%.
Correct.
So they'll turn their first floor study into a bedroom or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a shortage of inventory for a number of reasons, but that's a big one. That there's just a lot of people locked into their house and they can't really sell it because they can't afford the new mortgage rate.
Right. Well, one of the points of that article and a few others is that on the other side of the housing equation, on the buyer's side, potential buyer's side, is, as we've heard for years, the middle class has been shrunk, and wages have been relatively stagnant compared to authentic, real inflation. That there just isn't younger buyers, and by younger I'm really referring to first-time buyers. I mean, for the most part, they're younger. Is how do you, as the price of a home goes up and the percentage of the down payment you have to make then correspondingly increases, but your wages aren't keeping up with that. One of the kind of glaring things about this article and other reports is that an enormous percentage of first-time buyers are actually borrowing money from the bank of mom and dad. And if you don't have mom and dad in a position, or if they're not alive, or you don't have them in a position to be able to give you, $40,000, $50,000, $70,000 for a down payment, you're kind of screwed. Yes,
the number of homes that are purchased cash versus mortgage is over 30% now.
That's like stunning.
A lot of that is the parents. And if the parents have the funds, they can do a private mortgage with their children at 5-6%, which would be a good, safe return on a secured investment. And so that's a big factor that is helping out. But a lot of parents don't have that much cash. And so we have a lot of people on the sidelines waiting for the rates to go down.
And let's shift to that for a moment. I think this is one of the things that actually has made this a newsworthy topic, is the person really kind of in charge of, the rates, the head of the Fed, Jerome Powell, has been, shall we say, taking a beating from Trump and his rhetoric about, he's the holdup. Him not adjusting that rate, which, you could say, well, maybe Trump's just saying that for political reasons, but it's important to remember that when Fed Chair Jerome Powell, just before the election, cut the basis point by, 50 point, the interest rate by 50 basis points to try to spur the economy on to help Biden get reelected. And now, with inflation down, which interest rates correspondingly should come down, he won't budge. And for home buyers, I mean, this is true of all sorts of things, borrowing money for, buying a car, or whatever you borrow money for, but particularly home, which is what we're talking about, buying a house, that rate, that average 30-year fixed rate just keeps, hovering around the high range there. Is Trump's rhetoric, in your opinion, founded in reality that, if Jerome Powell cut those rates, this would have a knock-on effect and at least open up the market a little bit more to first-time buyers?
I'm going to run contrary
Okay.
to what a lot of thoughts are. And the 30-year mortgage and the 15-year mortgage are primarily based on where the 10-year bond is. Or, as we know, when we were kids, parents would buy a treasury bond, a 10-year bond when you're 7, and cash it when you're 17 and you're starting college and so on.
Right.
So that is up around, in fact, I just looked it up this morning. That is running about 4.3% for a 10-year bond, and that would bring in around 7% for mortgage. So that's most heavily where it's weighted on. In fact, when Jerome Powell made his 2/4 point, for those that basis points would be 25 would be a 1/4 point.
Right.
So he made 2/4 point drops, contrary to normal economic theory, but he just did it, probably politically, I'm not sure. But the mortgage rates actually went up. And part of the thinking is it's hard to know where things are going to be 4 years out, much less 10 years out.
Oh, sure.
But the general thinking is there's inflation out there yet to come. And so that creates the bond market being higher. And so thus the 30-year and 15-year fixed. Now, historically, it is true that the 10-year bond does seem fairly closely linked to what the federal discount rate is, which right now is 4.5%.
Right.
And so where you really get a break on the Fed cutting rates is more for the short-term things, car loans and things like that. So
is there some logic, though, that while there's not a direct tie-in like there would be for short-term things, that if you are saving money in the short term, you're paying lower interest rate for your car and car loan or whatever, all those sorts of things, that you wind up having at least some more cash in your pocket. You can get rid of debt faster, the credit card debt, whatever, and at least have some things. I mean, one of the problems for everyday young family or people who won't start a family because they just feel they're economically squeezed. They don't have a place to start a family, or at least begin to raise a young family. They just can't get together the down payment. Wages, like we mentioned earlier, are not keeping up with the inflation. They really haven't for years, and they're just going to throw their arms up in despair and just say, "You can't do this. I don't know what to do."
Yeah, the down payment is a big issue. In fact, swerving into it, by the way, we've got a little bit of an internet connection on my end that can jump in and out. So I'll try to answer a question, but I missed a bit of it.
Okay.
The 30-somethings is, yes, number one, they should have been buying sooner. Number two, it's tough for them to get the down payment together because they're facing stagnant wages with heavy inflation, and they just can't save the money. A third component that's in there, too, is the student loans, which are over $1 trillion. And those are now back online,
right.
Very recently back online. So a lot of people were able to get in, buy the house because that wasn't showing up on the ratios that the lenders want to see that you're comfortable that you can make the payment. So that's another component that makes it difficult. There's a lot of headwinds for the first-time buyer.
Let's talk about sort of the mortgage request. Because obviously you've got to buy a house and figure out, what's the monthly payment? Can I afford it? And they generally say if the monthly payment exceeds roughly 30% of your gross income, then you probably shouldn't go into the house. Okay, so that's a big sort of giant rule of thumb. There's exceptions. And how much other debt do you have? And all this, how's your credit history and all that stuff. But that's sort of the big giant banner. Laying that aside for a moment and talking about how do I qualify for the mortgage, you have to make X amount of money again because of that 30%. But they look at two sort of different things: roughly 30%, no more than 30% on your mortgage payment, and roughly no more than 35-ish% of your mortgage payment plus all your other debt, car loans, student loans. You drop a student loan into that mix, for a few $100s a month, what is essentially oftentimes the amount of a car payment or even more, that blows your ratios out of the water. And a bank or a lending institution is just not going to give you the loan because they don't think you're going to be able to pay it. Is that basically how it works?
It is. The historically, for the old timers, the ratios would be 28% for the payment,
right,
and 36% when you throw in the other debt, like your credit cards or your car payments and so on.
Right.
And the banks are loosening up. So you see a lot of people in the 40s on what they call the back end ratio, even approaching 50%. And so they're trying to make it happen, but that's still can you imagine 50% of your income going just to the house payment and your car payment, essentially, and the student loan maybe. So that doesn't leave a lot. It puts them in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, and so people understand that 50% is 50% of your gross income. When you
correct.
Consider, taking out around 17 to 20% for the average person, the average pay amount for taxes. So you've got here's your 100% pie. 50% goes to your house and your debt. Roughly 20% goes to your taxes. That leaves you 30% for everything else. And that's everything else. That's all your utility bills. That's all your food, your gas, all that stuff. Just your regular sort of expenses that come up frequently. And, this is, you can understand why people are just sort of, they're kind of frozen in place right now when it comes to home buying.
Yeah, there's no question. I'm a little surprised, to be honest with you. There isn't as much unrest in that electorate because it's not just in the U.S. This is a problem with basically Western civilization, Western Europe, Canada, especially Canada.
Yeah,
Australia,
Canada's through the roof on their prices. I mean, it's
really
hundreds
difficult.
and hundreds of thousands of dollars for not that much house.
The situation is much worse in Australia and Canada. And a lot of people don't know, too, that about 65% of the people live in a home that is owned. So 35% is your renter base.
Right.
And so that's not the same throughout these other countries. So we have a fairly robust homeowner percentage at 65. And so I don't have any political skills, but I would think that this is either has to have some resolutions or there's going to be a lot of discontent, which makes people change their vote.
Let me ask you, what do you think? And again, I know you're not, you're admittedly not a political dude, but as I said at the top of the show, what you don't know or haven't considered probably is not worth knowing. So you do have an awful lot of world experience and views and everything you've shaped over the years, and particularly in the whole real estate market. How much do you think the immigration issue, because you hear this a lot, a lot of it, and all sort of the political chatter going on about home prices and whatever. One of the things you hear a lot is that these millions and millions of illegal immigrants, they got to live somewhere. And they're all put up in the Roosevelt Hotel in downtown Manhattan, which, by the way, is now over. It ended last month. How much of that is creating a spillover problem for actually being able? I mean, if they're all gone and whatever houses they're either in renting or buying or paying on, if those houses suddenly become available or over the course of the next year or so start to free up, that if you increase the supply, the price should go down. Is there just what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as far as home ownership, it has not been a component, but in the rental market, it's even worse. it's harder to find a rental than it is to buy a house. And so we do have 10 million new residents here, most of which will stay. They'll remove the active criminals, but the rest are going to stay. And so I have a postulate that with a couple of years of history in a particular category of work, so I'm a home builder, carpenter, plumber, I need 2 years of experience in that one field and a green card, and I can buy. Right. So I think we're going to see the problem exacerbated in the purchasing market as the people that are here illegally are going to start buying.
Sure. I mean, that will drive the supply down because more people are buying, which of course drives the price up, which exacerbates the entire problem that we're talking about on the show as the lead-in thing. Housing woes. You can't get a house if you're a new buyer.
Yeah, and we don't have a clue how that's going to play out as far as folks. You know, I'm sure there's some folks that are going to be watching your show that fall into that category. And God bless them for being Catholic or at least Christian and viewing. But we may see a situation because of the Hispanic populations having more multi-family cohabitation. So the grandparents and the parents and the child might, instead of buying a starter home, they put 3 families into a $500,000 home and buying it. So there's 3 in 1. Unknown if that's going to happen, but I think that there'll be some of that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it won't be. Yeah, it's a little hard to guess how millions of people who came across, illegally. Granted, a lot of them were criminals and child sex traffickers and all of that and everything, but it's probably safe to say, at least I hope, that that's not the majority of people that came across, all the rapists and killers and child sex traffickers and the drug cartel people and the terrorists from various parts of the world and all that. I mean, nobody really knows what percentage of nobody really knows how many people it came across, and the numbers range from 12, 13 million all the way up to 21, 22 million. That's a pretty wide range. But even if you just settle on, say, 17 million, what percentage of those people are the dangerous, like really dangerous element? We don't even know that. But the majority are not. We don't know. And so they're going to be faced with this, where are they going to live? Where are they living now? Can they do, as you said, like get into these, various trades and get green cards, which allows them to buy a house. And to some degree, it's going to shrink the inventory, available inventory. Is there any sign at all that new home start constructions are increasing to offset that?
I don't think that the new residents are impacting anything in new construction. But I did want to mention one bonus point, that the builders have come up with a magic bullet for the interest rates. Now, this is only for the people that can afford it, but you take your $600,000 house and you label it at $630,000. Now I can buy down the rate. So I pack an extra $30,000 on top of the price, and then I can bring in a 4.9% interest rate on a 30-year fix. That's been very popular. Now, that's not going to affect a lot of people, but folks that can afford the higher end, they're moving towards the new construction because of the builders buying down the rates. And it's not free, but they like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you put some money up front, a bigger chunk of money up front, so that once you get into the house, your monthly payment is not as unmanageable. It's a little bit more digestible because you're paying less.
It's not increasing the down payment; they're increasing the price of the house.
Correct, but the exchange is that you get a lower interest rate.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, that's a popular product, and especially in Florida, for example.
sure, sure. Let me ask you sort of how this economic stuff for housing for young families, new time buyers who want to raise a family, start a family, already have a little bit of a family. They've been, been uncomfortable into a degree living in apartments because you can do that for, the first year or two with a new child or a couple new children. But there comes a point where you need more room. It's just a reality of human reality. What do you think for the civilization, for the culture, for society is? What's the knock-on effect of all this economic stuff and this housing stuff when it comes to making the culture and society, the nation, more stable? Seems like this makes things less stable.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The desire to own a home is very high, as difficult as it is. And so if that remains, then I don't think we'll have instability, which you get where people, let me digress this way.
Sure.
It started under Clinton, and it kind of ran even through the Bushes and whatnot. It brought us to the 2008 real estate debacle, where the government, like Barney Frank, Frank bill that came out of that, they were encouraging banks to give money to people that couldn't pay it back.
Right.
So we saw home ownership skyrocket way over the 65%, which is sort of a normal place to be. And so we forced renters to become owners, but they couldn't do it. And then everything fell apart, and that's when we got foreclosed on it. We had that big crash in 2008 because we were trying to do unnatural things with the government. And just as a side note, that Dodd-Frank, which were very much a part of creating that mess,
Sure.
were assigned to write the bill to fix it. It's like, you guys made this mess. Why don't you write the bill to fix it?
Yeah.
So another mess that we have even today. But as far as where we are now, I think there's just enough of a natural desire to own that we're going to stay at that 65% level. So I don't see that happening in the U.S. Definitely Australia and Canada are going to be different. But for U.S., I think we're going to be all right. That one way or the other, these buyers are going to fight and claw their way into a house.
Yeah, it does seem so. Is there any sense that, and just so the audience understands, we get that this is, there are 1,000 variables in all of this sort of stuff, and each one of them is constantly a moving target. I completely understand that. That's why, if there was a simple solution to all of this, it would have already happened. The problem is that the economy is constantly shifting and moving, and wealth going here and going back over there and stuff, and decisions, and and then that's just domestically. What happens internationally, of course, impacts that too, with prices and interest rates and everything. So it's sort of like looking at the solar system and focusing on one planet, or the sun, a star, whatever, and disregarding the fact that all these other things are also moving around, and everything's relative to everything else. So if some of this causes folks out in the audience to have like eye glaze, that is the right response, because there's a lot of craziness here. But you still have to talk about each individual planet within the solar system, or each movement within a certain galaxy. Everything's moving at the same time. So, economics is it's very hard to get your brain around. It really is, because of all of those factors. And those are things about. Something comes in, a surprise, a black swan event, and all of a sudden, all bets are off. But given that, is there something to be said to the thing of just build more homes? why would big construction companies like Pulte, for example, not them in particular, but just as an example, lots of people know that name, why wouldn't they just say, look at this. There's a huge demand out there for homes. Why don't we just build some more? It seems simple. Why is that either not being done or won't work?
Well, the biggest problem for the builder is the cost of the lot. A normal ratio is 80-20. If you had a $200,000 house, the lot's $40,000. You can't find a $40,000 lot. The builders, depending on the area they're in, more expensive interior part of the country, less, but they got to build homes in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 range. They just can't build $200,000 homes. Now,
and why are lots so expensive?
Well, that's a good question. There is one of the things that the Trump administration has floated out there is taking some of the federally owned land. I don't know if it's 30% or something to that effect that is federally owned in this country, but it's high, and turn that over to developers, almost like a homesteading act from the 1800s. Say, we will give you this land for a song if you build these houses and build these cities. So that's been proposed, but I'm not sure how that will work. That's just a pro forma idea.
Sure. I mean, it certainly seems on the surface, going back to what we were saying earlier, there's a million moving parts, a million pieces, and every one of them is moving and has their own little orbit around them. So it's all very variable. But that certainly seems like, if the problem for building, the initial problem is, hey, the land is just too expensive. We need more land. Well, freeing up government-owned land seems logical. Would you agree?
It would seem like it could be done. When you take it out of market conditions and you put it in the hands of government, I guess, then things seem to go sideways. That's just been a problem.
Yeah.
But the idea is sound, but it would have to be done with market conditions in play and not having a lot of government. It's almost like you got to give them the land and say, let the market conditions feast off of this. Way beyond my scope. In real estate or finance or anything, it's just doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Yeah, we all know the rule of unintended consequences. You do something, it seems to be logical and everything up front, but
one of the things we were talking about too is like, whether it's Australia or Canada or Western Europe or Eastern Europe, those don't really affect us. But what does affect us is when the Bank of Japan or China or the EU start lowering their rates, we are sucked into, and right now we're trying to, with the Jerome Powell situation, he's trying to keep the rates high and everyone else is cutting. So that is a component that swirls around with us. But the other problems that these other countries have don't spill over into us, but the economics of the interest rates do.
Well, why do you think, just for curiosity, there is the housing woes, if you want to call it that, are so much more pronounced in other Western nations, Australia, Canada, most of Europe? Why do you think that is? I mean, just because they have less land? I mean, Canada certainly does. Well, I was going to say Canada certainly doesn't have less land, but it might be a problem of habitable land. It's pretty bloody cold up there.
Yeah. I actually have never looked at that. I've never seen a study, so I'm sure that such things exist. I mean, obviously, Australia is almost completely empty.
Right.
Canada, almost completely empty. I mean, even if the U.S., anyone knows flying a plane or over the country, you look down and it's mostly empty.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have a clue on to why these other countries are mismanaging their land so poorly.
Yeah, it is pretty. Certainly in Canada, I mean, if you look at the northern border of the U.S., I believe the number is 70% of all Canadians, which is not a very large country population-wise. I mean, it's okay, but it's not, the United States with 350 million people in it. 70% of that population, Canadian population, lives within 100 miles of the U.S.-Canadian border. So it all just being so densely packed there is one of the things that some Canadian friends have told me is the reason why everything's just so ridiculously expensive, because everybody wants to live in the same block. And there's only so many homes you can get in the same block.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, I wish I had even an inkling, but I don't know about these other countries. I know a lot about this one, but
yeah,
not much about those.
Let me take a break here and step out of the conversation and ask about your efforts as the dude who essentially created and runs Real Estate for Life. First of all, what is it? And second of all, how does it work?
Well, we have two primary functions. One is to connect buyers and sellers with faith-based experienced agents. We have 1,400 of them throughout Canada and U.S., and most of them have worked with us for many years. We're on speed dial with them, so these are not an agent assigned electronically to somebody. Everybody's treated like a hand-packed ice cream cone because everyone's situation is different. So as far as that part goes, anyone contacting us will be working with somebody that we're very familiar with in most cases and have worked with for years. Then the second component is using some of the commissions that are generated from these sales to help pro-life, faith-based Catholic apostolates like your own and so on. And what happens there is the average home is about $400,000. If you see the average commission is around 5%, it's always negotiable, but we'll use that as a number. So you've got 20,000. Now you've got brokerages on both sides. So you're looking at 10,000. We then get a referral from that. They typically say 2,000. And then we're going to donate 60% of that to the faith-based organization that originated the information. So if they saw us on Souls and Liberty, that would help to support you. It doesn't affect commission structure or anything like that because the agents are getting business they did not have, and attorneys, doctors, real estate all have referral systems. So it's a natural feature.
Sure. So just for clarity, if I'm a buyer, let me be one of the viewers for a moment. If I'm a buyer, and I'm like, oh, I like this house, here's the deal, here's my real estate agent, Mr. Green. And Mr. Green says, sure, we got put together by Real Estate for Life. And when this is all said and done in a closing and the whole bit, I, the buyer, don't pay 1 cent extra. The money comes that I want the organization to get, whatever the organization is, Souls of Liberty. That money comes from the pocket of the realtor, my realtor, who would not have had this deal had it not been for Real Estate for Life making the connection. So he gladly, because he got a cold call and he got a sale. And for him, he's like, yeah, I'll pay, whatever, some portion of my commission for that. I sit at my desk and I don't really do anything and I make a sale. Is that the overall scope of it?
That's why it's so natural, and that's why it was a Holy Spirit inspired idea, because I was simply talking with another pro-lifer with a different business model, and he was looking to use referrals, support that industry of the pro-lifers, and the whole thing downloaded into my head. So there's nothing unnatural. We're simply sticking our toe in a stream of activity, providing service because, it's interesting. So often I hear from the agents that the customers I sent them, they're now personal friends.
Right.
They're going to the same church, prayer groups. It's just marvelous.
Yeah, it really is a great network. I should say that I believe, on the full disclosure thing, I believe that you and I had an acquaintanceship years ago prior to this, but then you called me one afternoon and said, hey, can I come in and talk to you about something? And the something, of course, was this idea, Real Estate for Life. And you said that you were, you told me in that initial conversation about this, that
we
you
lost
were
you right
sitting in
after
adoration.
I lost you right after. It's a great network. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a great network, and then just in the form of full disclosure, you and I, again, like I said at the top of the show, have known each other for a very long time, but got much more involved when Real Estate for Life came up, and you called me one day and said, hey, can I come into the studio and talk to you about this idea? And during that conversation, which was sort of the ramp up for all of this, you told me that you were actually sitting in adoration, and the whole idea kind of flooded into your head, sort of all cemented into your head there. Talk to us about that for a little bit, because I think that's a really important component to all of this. Once
the idea was in place, we had started with some pro-life groups like Human Life International and so on, but we didn't have any audio visual. It was just newsletters going out, and it didn't produce a lot. Then I had actually, this is the Holy Spirit again. You had done a show on the cost of abortion, which actually ran on a UHF television channel one time, pardon me. And I saw it, and I was just, I can't believe this is on TV. And it stuck with me, the cost of abortion. And so, yeah, it was later that I was in prayer, and I'm thinking, how do I take Real Estate for Life and I move it to something in the audio visual world? And then the whole idea was like, oh, Gary Michael Voris, because I had seen the TV show, and that's how I ended up calling you. So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah,
we had a number of supernatural events like that, but that was clear as a bell.
Yep, that's St. Paul says all things work to the good. It is interesting. I saw a little post go by on one of my social media accounts, and it said, Jesus has the rudder, but he expects you to row. And I think that's part of it. It is this sort of great mystery of the spiritual life that God obviously is God. He can do anything he wants, and he can make things just boom and boom and do all that stuff. But for some oddball reason, which I don't, lots of people have tried to expound on and come up with ideas. There's no firm, clear teaching or understanding of it. For some reason, God wants his creatures involved in his work, meaning doing the stuff. And it is very, always sort of brings a smile to my face when I think about that, because that's exactly what this is, in this case, Real Estate for Life. I mean, does God need, Dave Theisen and Real Estate for Life in order to help, advance the pro-life cause? No, of course, God doesn't need anything. Doesn't need me, doesn't need anybody. But he wants, and that's the distinction, he wants people involved in the work of the good.
What's very interesting also in the post-COVID world, I'll try to put this as delicately as I can, but the Catholics are sticking together like I've never seen before. And you have a lot of ethnic groups, you might say the Polish or the Italians, and they'll seek out their own brethren to go to the coffee store or the butcher. The Catholics weren't doing that, and now they are. And it's not just the forcing of the closing of the churches, while the abortion mills, the liquor stores, and the casinos stayed open, strangely enough. We had to close the churches.
Yeah.
And then to have government agencies taking down license plate numbers outside of churches and this type of thing, especially the Latin Mass community, that has really galvanized the Catholics to look for Catholics. I would say 20% of our customers simply Google find a Catholic realtor.
Really?
And yeah, 15 to 20%. And
that's substantial.
Most of them are Catholic. We do have a few Protestants, but we're working on bringing them to the fullness of the faith. But yeah, that's amazing. That just Google search, find a Catholic realtor, very common.
Talk to me, if you can, a little bit, because I know you obviously keep some records on this because of your head is in this every day of the week. We've heard about the great shift, the demographic shift from the blue state conservatives, mostly in blue states, who just can't take the tyranny in whatever form it hits them, school board, meetings or taxes or, censorship, whatever it is. They're just done, and they move to red states.
Threats.
But how much of that from your work would you say? How much of that is of the most conservative base has a rather large percentage of Catholics in it, and then they move. But not only do they move to a red state, they move to particular areas of red states. Is that right?
Yes. That's the majority of our business. It's not just a part of it. That's the heart and soul. Is Catholics leaving California, New York, Illinois in particular, those three have been the number one for exodus. And there's been some shifts there as far as like if people are thinking about doing this, protecting their family, and it's a lot of work. You've got friends, you got family. It's difficult to pick up and move to another state, but they're doing it. And especially with the COVID, they flooded into Texas and Florida, and a lot of Florida was just DeSantis is there, freedom,
Yeah.
And I'm fleeing to freedom. Now, what's happened now is a lot of them that went to Texas, it was sort of like, wow, this is really hot. And then Florida was like, what is it, the deal with these hurricanes? And why is the insurance so high? And why are the cockroaches so large? So
that's true here in Houston, too.
So we're seeing a resetting there where they're looking more into sort of the Tennessee, South Carolina, Arkansas, a little bit more temperate climate that they're looking for. And so those are the hot spots. Now, I hear this often. Well, I'm moving into a Bible belt, where, there's not a lot of Catholic churches. But actually, you'll take something like Greenville, South Carolina. You've got 50,000 Catholics that have moved into Greenville, South Carolina. It's a Catholic town.
Over what period of time? Since COVID?
4 or 5 years.
Wow, that's quite a migration. Greenville's, it's not a gigantic sprawling metropolis, but to just drop in 50,000 people over the course of 4 or 5 years, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then, we don't tell people where to go because I don't want them to go there and say, you told me to go here.
Right.
But I can tell people that are interested where people are moving to. And, you'll see a lot of common things. They'll tend to congregate around small Catholic colleges or apostolates. And obviously something like Ave Maria, Florida,
sure,
St. Mary's, Kansas, anything that had to do with Mother Angelica, those types of places, a lot of people are going. Probably the best example outside of Ave Maria was Tyler, Texas, because Bishop Strickland was there.
Correct.
And he was only 60 years old when he became known.
Right.
And so it's like, well, you got him for at least 15 years. And so there was a tremendous amount of people that went to Tyler specifically because of that. And they have a Veritatis Splendor complex that they're building with housing and other things. Well, that's now all in flux because Bishop Strickland's not there.
Sure.
And
let me concentrate on that point for a moment also. There, the idea of, because we were back in Detroit, we kind of had the same thing. The Detroit Archbishop at the time didn't like us and was pretty, he didn't like all the rot that we were exposing and everything, and kept hurling stuff at us through his I'll call them henchmen, his curial officials. And it's a pretty well-known story. And we were even looking around, saying, maybe in the early days of St. Michael's Media, we were saying maybe we should pick up and move here or move there. And we started looking around, and all of a sudden, just the idea popped into my head, like, well, what happens if that bishop isn't there in 5 minutes? Or
Right.
as the Book of Exodus says, and then a Pharaoh came to the throne who knew not Joseph.
Right.
So the idea, and just for people thinking who might be considering this or they're discussing it or whatever, it's probably a bad move to go bishop hopping. You should go to a community, obviously, where you can have work and all of that. I mean, if you're looking to be like, I want to be in a Catholic area for faith and raising my kids and all that stuff, you really shouldn't attach that to the bishop, even if nothing goes wrong with church politics and this bishop is there he's a good man and he's there for a while. He's not going to be there forever, and nobody is. So you should be looking for the community, and if you happen to have a really good bishop there and he doesn't fall victim like Bishop Strickland did to the, shall we say, the winds of change that blow quite frequently within the hierarchy, don't go bishop hopping, but you can certainly go Catholic community hopping. And it sounds to me that's like what a lot of your folks are doing.
Definitely. Yeah. You take something like St. Augustine, Florida. It has a long history of good, solid bishops in the past, and so that would be a pretty solid area to go to, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But you could end up with a 70s trained bishop come in there and start to undo things.
Sure.
So
not unheard of in the United States, certainly.
Yeah.
So
you really have to research that out and think that out, what you might do there.
Yeah, I mean, looking for if you're a family, whatever advancement in the maturity you are, whether it's a young family or sort of a middle family, older parents, or would have grandchildren or whatever the case is, you're looking for a community with your whole list of what are my priorities. And if your spiritual life, your faith life is sitting there at the top of that list, at least as much as you can control it, and contribute to it and take from it, back and forth, that's more important, obviously. But other things are also important. What's your job? What's the climate like? Do you have particular needs in your family, like health needs, for example? Are you near some facility or whatever that can treat those sorts of things? All of that kind of stuff. We all know moving is not just the physical throwing stuff in a Mayflower truck and hauling off somewhere. It's all of these considerations. And are you moving away from family? What's the psychological impact of that going to be? All that kind of stuff. It's emotional, it's physical, it's financial. It's, we are human beings, material human beings who need a place that we feel safe in, literally a safe space. That's ours, that we can, feel like we can thrive in. And all of that is majorly important. David, just before we leave here, as we're quickly wrapping up and running out of time, tell people how they can get in touch with you and the organization Real Estate for Life. And what sort of preliminary thing do you ask people when they get in touch with you?
Well, most people will simply put Real Estate for Life. We've been out there so long, you don't have to put .org. It will pop up. But it's realestateforlife.org. And most people will send an email inquiry, and then we respond, quickly to them, either that day or certainly the next day. And it really would start this way. Gary, thanks for supporting the Gospel of Life. I see you heard about us from Human Life International. Appreciate you supporting their work. How can we help you in Dallas? What part of Dallas? What are you looking to do? And then let them tell us what their plan is. And it could be any wide variety of things: upsizing, downsizing. Mom passed away, and we're going to sell the house, or a 1031 exchange. Just any variety of things. And once we have an idea of what they need to do, then pretty much immediately we will connect them with the agent that they need. If they need to talk, we have a Catholic mortgage banking team that we've been working with for many years. We also have a coast-to-coast Catholic mover. Now, having said that, we're wise enough to stay in our lane.
Right.
We could have Catholic doctors and other lawyers, and you could have a whole hodgepodge of that. But we know we can't do that. But we stay in our lane.
And it's a lane that you dominate and have done extraordinarily well with for lots and lots of people. I think I'm going a little bit down memory lane here, thinking I'm so glad that you came to us after you saw the Cost of Abortion show. I think that was in 2007.
Yes.
It was no later than 2008 that we produced that show. So that's going back, 18 years or so. Wow.
Yeah, we met in 2009, so it was
there. You go.
Maybe a year before that, something like that. So
it's quite
well. We're going to have a newsletter coming out also, and we're going to have some tips for things like how to shave thousands off of your mortgage, some simple tools, even not to beat the rate. So whatever the rate is, it is. But there's some tools that you can use. And so we'll bring that up in the future.
That's excellent. Yeah, everybody go to Real Estate. And even if you're not looking right now, it's still a good thing to check out, certainly, and just, say, hey, what is all this? And gosh, a vast percentage of the American population moves every year. Maybe not under the most ideal circumstances. A job comes up, or there's some family health thing, or whatever the case is, but that's a big, giant turnover, and there's roughly 70 million Catholics in America, just as a ballpark number. Churning that around, keeping all this going, helping funds go to, if you're watching this show and you want to find out more, please make sure that you tell Dave that you'd like, whatever proceeds that come from this, from the Realtors Commission, get directed here to Souls and Liberty. That would be nice. You be sure and tell him that, Dave.
Absolutely. And friends and family, that's another big component. Probably 15% of the people that contact us were, either the dad or the sister or a priest or something mentioned us to them.
Sure. So
we appreciate those personal referrals, and we honor them and protect them.
Yeah, and that gate swings the other way. Also, make sure that you tell people, hey, if the conversation comes up, and you sitting at home, folks sitting at home, you're like, hey, this is a great thing, and it's a win-win-win. So be sure and say, hey, before you do anything, contact this guy, Dave, at Real Estate for Life. Dave, we got to wrap up here and say goodbye. We're fresh out of time, but thank you very much once again for coming on. Great insights. I think anybody watching the show, certainly to this point, is like, wow, this guy knows a heck of a lot about a heck of a lot when it comes to homes and buying and how it all fits together and mortgages and the whole bit. So as usual, Dave, we really appreciate you being on. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Gary. God bless you.
God bless. All right, and that wraps us up here at Souls and Liberty in depth for this week. We are, we're growing our interview base, talking about all kinds of things, and from the big picture, and then we bring them down to how are those things impacting your daily life. So that's why we go in depth here at In Depth on Souls and Liberty. For all of us here, we appreciate you watching. Please tell your friends and family about it. And if you're going to do something with the house, please get in touch with Real Estate for Life and say, hey, give that commission over to Souls and Liberty. That's it for all of us here. I'm Gary Michael Vorse coming to you from Houston, Texas. God love you.